ultralight beam. We on an ultralight beam. This is a God dream. This is a God dream. Yeah. This is everything.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Leadership Forward, March of 2023. Can y'all believe that it is March already? And it's like we're on the back end of March. Today is the 16th. So next week will be spring. And the day after that will pretty much be April. Can you believe it? Listen, welcome to Leadership Forward on behalf of SBC 21 and the Black Church Matters. I want to say thank you for joining us tonight. This is our monthly webinar. And we're excited that you have joined us tonight. We have something great in store. And I know I say that every month, but every month, you know, it's good. It's great. It is what we need to hear on time. And I'm excited about tonight. So what is Leadership Forward? It's an opportunity for SBC 21 and the Black Church Matters to offer you leadership webinars, leadership conferences, leadership information to help you to be the best leader that you can be. And so third Thursday of each month, we come together and offer Leadership Forward. We have some dynamic speakers that come on with us to enlighten us, teach us, encourage us. And tonight, we have Reverend Twanda King. And I am so excited that she is here. I met her a little over a year ago, and just her energy is infectious. I'm thankful for her and her leadership. She works with SBC 21 and one of our coaches, but she is also just one of our leaders, helping to make sure that we are continuing to offer everything that we can to the church body and our leadership. So I'm excited tonight that she will be joining us. I'm excited that you're here. So the first thing we have to do is find out who's on, who's watching, and tell us where you're from. Another Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you all for joining tonight. This is great. We're happy that you're here. And I want to bring on Reverend Twanda King. We are excited that she is joining us. She is not new to SBC 21 and definitely not new to pastoring in the pulpit. I tell you what, she is going to talk about breathing and taking that moment. And I literally took a moment for myself a couple of weeks ago, and I'm a changed person because of it. And I know that it needs to happen often. If you haven't picked up her book, it is on Amazon, and I will drop the link in the chat so that you can go ahead and order your copy tonight. Reverend King, I'm going to turn it over to you. I don't want to take away much of your time tonight so that we can get everything that God has sent you here to share with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Candi, and thank you all for having me tonight. As I was introduced, I'm Reverend Twanda King from the Baltimore, Washington Conference, and I pastor Union United Methodist Church in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. So we're just going to go ahead and just get started. And I just want us to have a word of prayer. Candi already prayed, but what I want us to do is just a breath prayer. And so just for a minute, if you would just sit in your chair, put your foot flat on the ground, place your hands in your lap. If you are comfortable to do so, close your eyes. And we just want to take a minute to breathe in God's air and let it out. Breathe in and let it out. And I like to do that because it gives us an opportunity to just pause. Sometimes when we come to these webinars, we have already had a full day. Some of us running and hurried up and get the link and cut it on. So that gives us an opportunity to just stop and pause. So I pray and ask God to open our eyes, our ears, and our hearts at this moment. So the objective, this webinar will focus on the importance of caring for yourself, building resilience, and finding your own rhythm of rest. I want to say, my brothers and sisters, that ministry is a crowded space, and crowds can block what's needed to feed our soul. And so I just want to tell just a brief testimony of why I do this. I do this because back in 2000, I think it was 17, 18, the years kind of get a little cloudy now, but 17, 18, I suffered clergy burnout. I got to the point where I just could not go no more. I hit a brick wall. I was actually away at a conference in Philadelphia in a hotel at 12 midnight, and I hit a brick wall. I just could not go no more. Had a full-blown, felt like I was having a anxiety attack. The next morning, I called my district superintendent and I said, I need to get out. I really need to get out. And so she, with her help, I went on a 3-month Sabbath leave. So to me, it was a forced Sabbath leave. It was not planned. I started seeing a therapist during that time. so that I can come back whole in the ministry. And so I want to talk about, and so I have this passion now. I'm in school right now for clinical mental health counseling. And my desire is that when I finish, I help my colleagues, that I'm able to help colleagues breathe and find their own breath in the midst of ministry. And so I want to ask a question. I want to start us off with a question. What's your theology of self-care? What's your theology of self-care? Somebody can write that in the chat, or you can write it on a piece of paper. Just think about it. What's your theology of self-care? And somebody might say, what's my theology of self-care? What do you mean by my theology of self-care? What is your God talk when it comes to self-care? What is your God talk when it comes to self-care? Let me have one person to write something in the chat about that. What is your God talk when it comes to self-care? Maybe you might be writing it on a piece of paper. Somebody say, quiet time is holy. Thank you, Candi. Quiet time is holy. Your God talk when it comes to self-care. Because self-care right now seems like it's a buzzword. It seems like it's this buzzword. But when I look at self-care, my theology of self-care comes out of Matthew 22, 37 and 40. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the reason why I look at this as my theology of self-care is because it said, love your neighbor as yourself. Your love of others start with our love of ourself. It starts with loving ourself. So I want to share this. When I first started with a therapist and I sat down in her office, this is what my therapist said to me, which was a wake-up call. Twanda, you are in the business of self-sacrifice. Let me tell you, right now, you don't have a self to sacrifice. You need to find yourself. This is what my therapist said to me the first time I saw her. Wake up call. Wake up call. Somebody said theology of self-care is taking time to be still, reflect, and ask yourself, do you really love yourself and why? Thank you. So this is what my therapist said to me, that you're in the business of self-sacrifice. And right now you don't have a self to sacrifice. You need to find yourself. And let me tell you, that was a wake-up call for me to find who Twanda was in the midst of ministry. Because evidently I had let her go. Evidently I had let her go, because if I had not, I would not have found myself burnt out. Let me tell you, if you don't take care of self, you won't have a self to give somebody else. If you're not loving yourself, if we're not loving ourselves in a healthy manner, we can't love those around us. The scripture told us to love others as we love ourselves. Self-care is more than bubble baths, girls' trips, nails and hair and all of that kind of stuff. Self-care is showing up in our own lives. Showing up in our own lives. Self-care is about knowing yourself, knowing your limits, knowing when to say yes and when to say no. Self-care is about boundaries. Self-care is about living a balanced life. It's about, it's when we love ourselves, it's only when we can give love. It's about being, self-care is about being self-aware. Self-care is intentional. And I like to say this, it's managing your calendar and not letting your calendar manage you. Let me tell you, that's what I was doing. My calendar was telling me where to be instead of me telling my calendar when I need to show up. It's about how well do I manage my entire life. That's what self-care is about. That's what self-care is about. So Matthew 11:28-30 says, I'm reading this from the Message Bible. Are you tired? Are you worn out and burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you will learn to live freely and lightly. It is God's desire that we learn to live freely and lightly. I want to read this in the NIV. The NIV version say, come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So I had to ask myself, in this day and age, who are the weary? Who are the weary, my brothers and sisters? Because this is an invitation for the weary to rest. Who are the weary for us today? Might I surmise it as those who have tried to live under the legalistic system of our time? My brothers and sisters, us as pastors and leaders, we are pressured to live under the legal system of how ministry is supposed to operate today. We are weary. The heavy burden of ministry, society, and our challenges, all while trying to keep our head above water. Who are the weary that they're talking about in this text? I believe it's clergy who worked through the pandemic. Our weariness did not start in March 2020 when the pandemic started. No, the pandemic amplified the many pandemics we were already living in. You know who the weary are? The weary are the pastors and leaders who were challenged to close the doors of the church in 1 week and had to find creative yet vibrant ways to bring our congregations together virtually. You know who the weary are? The weary are those who lost loved ones, who are still grieving the loss of their loved ones. They have lost loved ones during the pandemic. We know who the weary are. The weary are those who my brothers and sisters, who tried to find meaningful ways to bury our members, their loved ones, and even our family members. We know who the weary are. The weary are the ones who had to pray for our members on Zoom, sometimes watch with the family as the doctor take them off of life support.
The weary are the ones who tried to make sense of the first pandemic many of us encountered in our lifetimes. And on top of the COVID-19 pandemic, my brothers and sisters, we had to fight a pandemic called racism, systemic evil, civil unrest after the death of George Floyd, demonstrations and protests. We are weary. We participated in demonstrations and protests. We were fighting for justice in all sectors of society. We know who the weary are. We tried to keep our eyes and ears open to the ills of our community, all while dealing with our own family challenges. We are the ones who wanted to make sense of it all. And as leaders, speak hope when we were ourselves sometimes was losing hope. We know who the weary are. We are the weary. We are the weary. Let me say, we can agree that the past 3 years have been hard on us emotionally. Some of us physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally drained. And if you did not come into the pandemic already taking care of your mental health, you found yourself looking for a therapist with no success because most of them were overbooked and tied themselves. So I recently read an article in an online edition of Psychology Today published. It was published in October 2020, and it was called The Emotional Impact of the Prolonged Pandemic. Now, this was October 2020, and I'm going somewhere with this. So the author stated that we were in the second wave of the pandemic. And in this article, the author quoted Dr. Sushrin's book called Emotional Inflammation. The book that was quoted in this article was written pre-pandemic. However, I believe it's relevant today. So Dr. Sushrin writes, now this was pre-pandemic, and I quote it, it's on the screen. A rising number of adults in the United States are troubled by a phenomenon they don't know there's a name for it. It may be sparked by a sense of agitation, foreboding, spiral negative thoughts, sleep disturbances, and a sense of hardly recognizing the lighthearted, fun-loving people they used to be. Now, this was pre-pandemic, and it is what was called emotional inflammation pre-pandemic. So you say, what is emotional inflammation? Emotional inflammation is a term for feeling extreme stress and experiencing a lack of emotional resources under pressure. So that's the definition of emotional inflammation. So Dr. Sushrin called society's emotional state pre-pandemic emotional inflammation. So according to Dr. Sushrin, pre-pandemic, we were already extremely stressed and lacked the necessary resources needed to handle stress under pressure, pre-pandemic. So I want to surmise that if that's true, we entered the pandemic emotionally inflamed. Now, inflammation is an indication that something is not right. It is a warning sign that the body gives to us that something is wrong. It's the indication that there's a deeper problem. And inflammation is normally a result of something that is deeper. It's not on the surface. It's not a surface issue. It lets us know that something is going on the inside that's causing your body to be inflamed. So I want to share this. Back in 2019, I felt this pain in my left shoulder, and it got to the point where I could not lift my arm above my shoulder. So I went to the doctor and was given an MRI, and the MRI showed that my left shoulder was inflamed, and the inflammation caused me to have what was called a frozen shoulder. It's a condition that affects the shoulder, making it painful and stiff with the loss of mobility. So I had lost my ability to move my left shoulder. So the doctor had to operate to remove this inflammation in order for me to gain mobility in my shoulder, to remove the inflammation in the inside that manifested itself on the outside by my lack of movement. So let me say this. If Dr. Sustren's diagnosis of society pre-pandemic is correct, then imagine where society is emotionally 3 years later. Now, this month, 3 years ago, on March the 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization announced that the coronavirus that caused COVID-19 officially a pandemic. So imagine where society is emotionally if they were talking about this pre-pandemic, especially if we did nothing to take care of our inflamed emotions. So I'm sure we all can agree that society has changed. We're not the same people who entered the pandemic in 2020. The pandemic has forever changed us, whether it was for the good or the bad. There is a shift. So I asked myself, if society is like this, where we are on the spectrum, if I ask myself, if society is like this, where are we on the spectrum today? Where are we when it comes to our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health? I asked myself the question, how inflamed are we as leaders? How inflamed are we as leaders? Recently, I read an article in the New York Times, and it stated, as Americans head into a third year of pandemic living, therapists around the country are finding themselves on the front lines of a mental health crisis. Social workers, psychologists, and counselors from every state say they can't keep up with an unrelenting demand for their services. And many must turn away patients, including children, who are in need of desperate support. So, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, young adults, racial, ethnic minorities, essential workers, and unpaid adult caregivers reported having experienced disproportionate worse mental health outcomes, increased substance use, and elevated suicidal ideation. So I asked myself, where do we fall on the spectrum? I would like to surmise that we are under the essential workers, because we were essential during the pandemic. We fall under essential workers. I can name a couple of other essential workers, but I believe that we fell under essential workers. So I want to give us some clergy statistics of where we are right now. So looking at a research done by the Barna Group, as of March 2022, now we are a year out from this, the percentage of pastors who have considered quitting full-time ministry within the past year sits at 42%, according to their survey. They say this is consistent with data from fall 2021, when Barna first reported on a sharp increase in pastoral burnout. And it confirms the growing number of pastors who are considering resignation, up 13% points from 29% in January 2021. So the percentage of pastors wanting to quit had gone up. So they asked pastors the reason. So here were the reasons. If you look at this, the top 3 reasons why pastors considered quitting full-time ministry was the immense stress of the job. I feel lonely and isolated, and current political divisions. Whew. Then they asked the question, for those who were not considering quitting, have any of the following negatively impacted their ability to lead at the church? These were the top things that negatively impact their ability to lead at the church. The immense stress of the job, current political division went up, and I feel lonely and isolated. So look at the ministry challenges that pastors are having. So the Bonner Group have this Bonner risk matrix. I wish I would have saw this long time ago. So this is a risk matrix. So what they say, if you fall within these categories, when you look at this, the burnout risk for pastors. So when we look at this burnout risk, they assess using 11 factors. So they say a pastor is low risk if they do not meet any of these factors. Medium risk if they meet criteria for one of the factors, and high risk if they meet 3 or more of these factors. And I'm not going to go through them, but if you get an opportunity to kind of just take a look at this, right? So they talk about the relationship risk, that they're at risk of, their relationships are in trouble, and spiritual risk. And let me tell you, as pastors and leaders, because I understand we probably have leaders on here as well, we can be at risk spiritually. We can be at spiritual risk. So let me ask the question, considering where you are and the work you are called to at this moment, how do these statistics speak to you, and where do they speak to you? You don't have to put it in the chat, but it's a question to ponder. How do these statistics speak to you, and where do they speak to you? Another question is, can you sustain at the rate you're going right now? Can you sustain in ministry at the rate you are going right now? So the question is, how do we overcome this? This is when we need to build our resilience, increasing our body's resilience to stress. And let me tell you, some of this is not easy. And increasing my body's resilience to stress, this takes intentionality. It takes us paying attention to our body. It takes us paying attention and being aware of our warning signs when we are tired and when we need to rest. This stuff takes intentionality. And so I want to talk about building resilience. So resilience, psychologists define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stresses. I believe resilience for believers, resilience is the hope of the gospel, because the gospel gives us the ability to adapt well in our adversity. The gospel gives us the ability to bounce back. 2 Corinthians 4:8-10 says, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be
revealed in our body. So let's talk about the resources that we need to build our resilience to stress. One, my brothers and sisters, we need to build connections. We need to prioritize relationships. As a pastor, it is important that we have strong relationships with people outside of the church. It is important that we build connections with people who are pastors and who are not pastors. We need to build strong relationships. This is important. This is how you build resilience. As a matter of fact, this is what psychologists say. This is the way that we build relationships. We connect with people, understanding people who can remind us that we are not alone. We foster wellness, take care of ourselves spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Foster wellness in all areas of your life, mentally, physically, spiritually. Do a checkup. How am I doing mentally? How am I doing physically? Mentally, how am I spiritually? Do a checkup. Take care of our bodies. Practice mindfulness. Find purpose. And I know when I do this, sometimes people go, oh, you know what? I have purpose because you know what? My purpose is my call. But find something else. Find something else outside the church to do. Find something else outside the church. Find some kind of hobby that will feed you, something that will feed you outside the church. Embrace healthy thoughts. Embrace healthy thoughts. You know what? Cast down those negative thoughts that weigh us down. And also seek help. Seek help. Seek help. I'm going to say that a couple of times. Seek help. Thank you, Peaches. She said, I'm on a journey too. Seek help. Seek help. And then play. Add more play into your life. Add more play into your life. When was the last time that you did something outside of ministry? When was the last time you took a vacation? When was the last time you put your cell phone down? Thank you, Pete. She said, I'm on my journey to a place called purpose. Yes, that's right. Embrace healthy thoughts. Add more play to your life. This is what psychologists say. This is how we build resilience. And we build resilience, I like to say this, in the summertime of our lives. We build resilience in the summer because this is the stuff that we need in the winter. We need to already have those connections in the winter of life. We need to already be fostering wellness in our lives in the winter. We need to already have something else that we can lean on in the winter, something else that we're doing. We build up in the summer so that when the winter comes, we don't die on the vine. We build up in the summer and then finding our rhythms of rest. Find your rhythm of rest. Find your rhythm, your ebbs and your flows when it comes to rest. Because I can tell you how to do it, but that's how I do it. But find what's your rhythm of rest. It's important that we rest. I can't tell you how many of my colleagues that I talk to that do not take a Sabbath day. We're not talking about a Sabbath leave. I'm just talking about one day a week and do not have a boundary around
that one day a week. We need to have a boundary around. And our bishop says 2 days a week, right? 2 days a week. We need to have a boundary around. That means not answering our cell phone messages. That means, not looking at church emails. What kind of boundary do you have around your Sabbath? Find your rhythm of rest. I want to go to this slide because I think we have to find the rhythm of rest of Christ. Jesus had this rhythm of rest where he was with the crowd and he withdrew. In the crowd, withdrew. In the crowd and withdrew. And we see that in Luke 5:15 and 16, it says, but the news about Jesus spread all the more, and great crowds came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. Yet he frequently withdrew to the wilderness to pray. How often are you withdrawn? How often are you doing that? How often are you going to a quiet place by yourself? So here are some ways we can find rhythm of rest. Hit the pause button. I like to call it God pause. Give yourself a God pause. Engage in ministry and then come out. Find those quiet places and spaces, time to be alone. Take time to breathe. Take time to breathe. Let me say that again. Take time to breathe intentionally during the daytime. Stop and pause. Interact with God and family. These are ways that we can find rhythm of rest. Allow God to speak directly to your spirit that you may be renewed daily. Remember, in crowd, engaged in ministry, in the crowd, and then repeat. These are rhythms of rest. In the crowd, quiet place, time to breathe. Interact with God and family, allow God to speak to you. In the crowd again, repeat. This is just a way that we can find rhythms. Find your rhythm of rest. There's this book that I read on my Sabbath leave. It's by a woman named Shirley Miller. And her book is called Rhythms of Rest, Finding the Spirit of Sabbath in a Busy World. And so she talked about these small pauses. It allows us to have less guilt, and practical preparation make rhythms of rest doable. These small pauses. You can have Sabbath during the day. You can have Sabbath during a work day. Small Sabbath, that's what I call it, just small Sabbath. She said God is creative, and the way we rest can be creative too. Sabbath is not a solitary endeavor. Rest revives the soul for greater attentiveness, not just for you, but for others. Sabbath is not something we earn, but a free gift we choose. She said, learn to be a confident, unanxious presence in the midst of turmoil and interruptions. Let me tell you, when we show up tired, it's easy for us to go into an anxious space. It's easy. April said, can you address the guilt that sometimes keeps us from embracing rest and Sabbath? You know what, April? Sometimes we think that there are times when we think we need to be present. When we think, like on a Monday, something could be going on and we think that we should be present, right? I'm going to give you an example. One of the ministries that I am a part of here in the Baltimore Washington Conference, they have their meetings on Mondays, and my Sabbath is Monday. And so that's a conflict on my Sabbath. And so the leader of the ministry, because I said something, began to take a poll of everybody in that ministry and when is their Sabbath, so that we can kind of accommodate our Sabbath and still have our meeting. So sometimes we don't speak up and say that this is my Sabbath. And so we just show up for the meeting. No, we need to say, this is my Sabbath. Can we find another way to do this? And then we feel guilty because we're not there. But when we speak up, it's less guilt and allows us to have Sabbath. And guess what? People will find another day to do ministry. Or we feel as though if somebody call us, we need to call them back. We look at the phone and it's a member called and we feel as though we need to call them back. Guard your Sabbath. I hope that helped April. She said, and I'm going to wrap up in a minute. Thank you. So Shirley Miller said, also recognize the everyday signpost from God revealing you are worthy of rest. I like that. The everyday signpost from God revealing you are worthy of rest. Maximize the restorative power of play and the indispensable usefulness of idleness, silence, and daydreaming. She said, maximize that. Identify when the fear of uncertainty sabotages rest. Envisioning time limitations and resetting boundaries as God's highest intention. And stop striving, stop doing, stop trying to rest. We must learn to wait in order to receive the riches and rest. Stop striving, stop doing, and stop trying to rest. Sometimes people say, you know what, I'm working on it. I'm getting there. No, stop striving, stop doing, and stop trying to rest. Make rest a priority. So my desire, my brothers and sisters, that you don't find yourself in the situation in which I found myself, and that is a forced Sabbath leave. I got to the point where I said at that time, I either take a break or I quit. I seriously said that. And the way that I said it to my district superintendent is I need to tap out or I quit. I had hit a brick wall. So my prayer is that you don't find yourself in the same situation in which I found mine. So if you could put questions in the chat, but here's a question I want to leave with you for reflection. Resilience is not the absence of distress or difficulty. Resilience is the ability to adapt and grow following adversity. What do you need from God in this season to build resilience in your life? So I want to leave you with that question. What do you need from God in this season to build resilience in your life? So at this point, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Candi.
I'm just going to bounce back on. I want you to stay on with me, Reverend King, as people are pondering your question. I know for me, this was a much needed reminder. As I shared earlier, I literally 2 weeks ago took a week off and disconnected. I did not use my phone. Very seldom did I use my phone. I tried not to check emails. I literally did not get international phone service, so I would not be tempted. I didn't even want to download movies, so I wouldn't be tempted to use my phone while I was away. But as soon as I got back, I felt the pressures of everything that I had going on. And I came back and got sick, and I still felt the pressure that I had to be present. And I asked myself, why do I do that? Why do I feel like I have to be, but it's okay for me to cancel a meeting or say that I can't be there because I'm sick. But you know why? For me, I saw my parents do it.
Wow.
I saw them show up for every time they were asked to do something at the church, go to work sick. I saw them do it. So then I realized that I'm repeating what I saw.
What you saw.
But now
Wow.
it's up to me to stop it, to stop
Wow.
that behavior, because it's okay. I had to tell myself, it's okay for me to be sick. It's okay for me not to turn my computer on. It's okay for me not to return phone calls. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes we allow ourselves to get in a burdensome place because we feel like, well, let me just go ahead and do it because the calls are going to pile up. Guess what? They could pile up. And even if you don't get to it, they'll call back.
That's right. You know what, Candi, I came up in an era, I remember in my 20s, like it was like a badge of honor if you can put on your resume that I multitask.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm,
Seriously, like that was like it was like a word to put on your resume. You wanted it
mhm.
on your resume that I know how to multitask. And now I say I don't know how to multitask. Like I can't do a lot of things at one time. You know, I need to focus on, and it's interesting because this just came up today. I was talking to a colleague of mine, and so we're planning some stuff. And so he said to me, and this was like around 3 o'clock, he was like, no, we need to give attention to this today. And I said, no, I don't. I got something at 7. I say I need to compartmentalize, and I'll deal with that tomorrow.
Yep.
And too often we don't do that. We try to juggle so much, and it
Mhm,
just makes us overwhelmed.
mhm, mhm.
It makes us overwhelmed.
And juggling that much, you're going to drop something.
You are going
the-
to drop something.
The stress comes. I remember telling my co-worker, we were working in a pretty large church and we all had lots of things going on. And I said, I feel like I'm juggling glass balls. And if I
Wow.
drop one, it's going to break. And I think I will break.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. And that's wow.
Mm-hmm. And I like what your what the lady said, make small pauses. And the note that I wrote myself is to make small pauses common. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
want it to be
yeah,
so common in my
yeah.
life that I just do it.
That
It's
you
part
just
of
do
what
it.
I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's become part. I called it she said small pauses. I called it God pauses.
God pauses.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I called it.
Mhm.
I called it God pauses. Because I'm telling you, I got to the point in my life where I had so much going on. I actually was in a DMIN program at the time when I burnt out.
Mhm.
And I had a paper that was due. It was actually overdue, right? And I was working on that paper. And that night in that hotel, I just became so overwhelmed that night. And I said, I can't go anymore. I have been doing so much, but I wasn't caring for me. And I love what I talk to my therapist about that all the time now, when she said, Twanda, you don't have a self to give. And that was so profound when she said that to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was so profound when she said that to me, that I didn't have. And we think about self-sacrifice because, you know, that's what we called to do in ministry. We're called to sacrifice ourselves. But she kind of really flipped that. Like her thing was, you need to find self in order to sacrifice self. You can't sacrifice something you don't have.
That's right. Kimulette, hi Kimulette. She says the world is moving fast and tools exist to allow for instant responses instead of using as tools to help manage reasonable expectations. The world is moving fast and tools exist to allow for instant responses instead of using as tools to help manage reasonable expectations.
I like that. I like what she's saying. Right.
And now many of you have traveled abroad, and if you ever notice, and I will use several places that I've been, not just in Africa, but in the US, Western culture, we're so used to, like she said, moving fast, going, wanting something and wanting it instantaneously. When you travel to other countries, they do not move like we move. And we see that as something negative, and I see that as less heart attacks.
Yes, yes.
They do not stress over that.
Yes.
Okay, will do, ma'am. Okay, I'm gonna get it done, but just not, you can't stand over them and say, do it right now.
Right.
We have to we gotta take some steps backwards.
Right. I like what Kimulette said.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What I'm looking at, what she's saying is we have to let these tools work for us. Right. She said, instead of using these tools to help us manage reasonable expectations, like we can let this work for us, but it kind of works against us. And I'm gonna give you an example. Like when we were talking before this, and I was talking about how I take emails and let them go out. I schedule them to go out the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We can sit down one day and kind of do that kind of stuff and just let it go out at a scheduled time. That's that resource working for us.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Automating, like she said, using what we have to better our lives, instead of, I have a computer at home in my lab, so I'm going to work all day, versus setting a time to work and working smart. Schedule your emails so that they go out at a reasonable time. And why is that so important? We talked about that earlier. If I send an email out at 10 o'clock, then you're going to assume that it's okay to call me at 10 o'clock.
To call me at 10 o'clock. And we're talking about 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
10 p.m. Right. I put it like this, and I believe this was happening to me during that time. And that is, manage your calendar and don't let your calendar manage you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let your calendar tell you where. No, you tell your calendar where you're going to be, and don't let your calendar tell you where to be.
Francis says, this is truly an eye-opener to realize the need for rest and build resilience. Thank you so much for powerful and needed sharing. Amen.
You're welcome,
Amen.
Francis.
Worthy of rest. There's another
Yes.
note that I wrote myself, because I literally have to remind myself of that. It's okay for me to pause.
It is.
I think sometimes we're so afraid of what's going to happen on the other side of it. The work will still be there, and you get it done when you
begin to, Candi, when you begin to put that boundary around yourself, people will begin to respect it.
Mm-hmm.
We tell people how to treat us. We tell people how to show up in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We tell people what boundary we have. And when we do that, people begin to respect it. In the beginning, it's a little uneasy for them, but after a while they'll say, Candi not available on Monday. Because you have said it so many times, they will begin to say you're not available.
Mm-hmm.
We teach people how to treat us and how to show up in our lives.
It's true. There's a question in the chat. There is self-imposed or member-imposed pressure to be all and do all. How do we best teach members to get on the same page with us in our restoration, in our and their need for restoration? Similar to what you just said, you have to.
Let me say this, when I took a Sabbath leave, My church didn't like it. They did not. I mean, it was not, let me tell you, people were not happy about it. But, and I think this answers her question. How do you teach the church? One, we got to let go of our own guilt. We got to let go of our own guilt when we're not there and when we can't show up. And as what you were saying, like when you talked about being sick, when we sick and having to counsel a meeting and stuff like that, we got to let go of our own guilt. And then another thing is, as you find that place of whole and healness, your church will find a place of whole and healness. Right? Your church will live out of that space. I'm telling you, when a pastor lives being whole and setting boundaries, we teach our church to do that. And I'm gonna give you an example. I am now pastoring a church that really believe in wellness and wholeness, and 15 minutes before worship, we have a time of meditation. People show up. It's the 15 minutes, 9:45 to 10 o'clock, and people do it. Now, I did not set that. The pastor before me did it because he was into wholeness and wellness. I mean, so much so that when I came, this congregation is used to it. They know certain things that we're not going to have, we're not going to serve, certain things we're not going to serve when it comes to food and stuff like that. So the pastor, to me, have to model it to the congregation. And let me tell you, your church will be better because of it. But we have to set that boundary. And it's not easy.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah, it's not easy. Right?
It's like working out. The muscles are gonna hurt at first.
Oh yeah, it's not easy.
It's not gonna be easy, Arthur. But you kind of gotta push.
You have to do it. Like one of my members told me, she said, Pastor, when the previous pastor started this, it was not without pushback, but the congregation got used to it. So when we live into that space, the congregation eventually follow. Not everybody. I'm not giving anybody like we got 100% buy-in.
Right. So we had a very similar question in the Q&A. I think they came in about the same time. Often there are some leaders and members who have great expectations of the pastor. There are some who understand. However, getting folks to understand we are human and we need to rest like Jesus. How do we help them understand we need to care? We need care ourselves to be better care for them.
One, that's a good question. One, this is one way it can start. Our conference did workshops for SPRC committees on caring for the pastor. And I thought that was good. Another way, I think we can do it in our teaching. We can start teaching just caring, teaching the congregation caring for themselves. And in essence, they will understand the need for the pastor to care for him or herself. But I think we can do it with teaching. I think sometimes it starts with our SPRC committees, because the SPRC committee should also be a committee that guards the pastor.
And for those people that are watching that are not United Methodist, the SBRC committee is.
For those, it's the committee. It's really like an HR committee. It's really like the HR on your job, right? So it's our HR in the church.
So we do
human resources
that watch that are not United Methodist. So
yeah,
it's your like your HR board.
Yeah. So
I like that. And I wrote a note about that because all conferences are not sharing that type of workshop, but that may be something that that SBC 21 can offer to leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, Carolyn says same as stewardship in other Methodist churches.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. But we did workshops for SBRC committees on caring for the pastor.
Yeah. This has been great tonight. I know everyone has enjoyed it. I tell you a couple of things that I want people to walk away with. Check out Reverend King's book, Breathe, A Pastor's Journey to Wholeness. And I'm going to drop the link in the chat. We also, in order to continue offering you the best and the brightest, we have a survey that literally will take you 1 whole minute. So I ask that you take a moment to complete the survey. If you don't have time tonight, you will receive it in your email. So if you just take a moment to let us know how we're doing, what you thought, and what you'd like to hear, we're happy when you are responding to us and we can hear from you. So listen, you all, if you didn't take away anything tonight, I want you to remember that you are worthy of rest. Let's give Reverend King a round of applause. You could do it in the chat, or you can clap out loud at home.
Thank you all.
April said this is life-giving. Thanks for opening it up for everyone. You're very welcome. The link for the book is in the chat. Oh, I did drop the wrong link. Thank you. So Amazon.com for the book. Take a moment to take the survey. It literally is really short, but we do want to hear from you. Listen, we love you and there's nothing you can do about it. We want to see you here next month. We are working on a little surprise, so we can't even tell you just yet what's going to be our topic for next month, because we kind of shifting some things and wanted to offer you something cool before the summer and everyone goes into annual conferences. Okay. So make sure you stay tuned. Visit us at sbc21.org. And I'm sure you want to share this with some of your leadership. You want to share it with some of your pastor friends. Check out our YouTube page, Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century. The video should be posted no later than Tuesday. Okay. Good night, everyone. I pray that you get some sweet rest tonight. Turn that phone off, turn the TV off, and just be. Have an amazing night.
Thank you all.